I'm delighted to say we've got Gary Breen with us this morning. Gary, there's loads of stuff in the Premier League happening and some very good narratives to speak about. But to be honest, I kind of just want to talk about Jack Charlton for now. So I'm really interested in what it was like for you growing up, being an Ireland fan, as Ireland played England in '88 and 1990, just as your football career is reaching a point where you're like, I'm going to be able to do this professionally.
Yeah, well, listen, you kind of think that when you see that team of '88, '90 and the heroes, they're the pioneers, and you want to be a footballer, you're desperate to play for Ireland. But I put them on such a pedestal because it was interesting on Saturday. It came on the news in the morning prior to the announcements about Jack that it was the anniversary of the 1982 World Cup. And I remember that vividly, Paolo, Dino Zoff, those type of guys for Italy and how good they were. And then suddenly you go into 84 with France, 86 in Mexico, and we're not there. And I'm an Arsenal fan growing up as a kid in London, big Ireland fan, and we've got O'Leary, we've got Brady, we've got Stapleton. Then I'm thinking about Lawrence and Whelan at Liverpool and those iconic 80s Liverpool's team. I'm thinking, well, why are we not there? I just couldn't understand it as a young kid, as a teenager, thinking, so you kind of put World Cups and major finals on a pedestal. Then suddenly Jack Charlton comes along and he's the architect of something so special. That 1988, I mean, I've said it to you guys on road shows before, where when we beat England that day, I literally bounced into school in North London, the proudest man. But the school I went to in Highgate was predominantly Irish anyway. It was a Catholic school, so I wasn't alone. And you just think of that man made all that happen, and everyone talks about the style and stuff like that, but I agree with Owen there. I think he was a very forward thinking. I look at the way he set that team up, how difficult Ireland were to play against, because if you think about the fact that we'd never been to a major champions before, suddenly we go to 88 and we're 7-8 minutes away from getting to the semi-final of the Euros, but for that shank shot by Koeman and then Van Keef gets that goal. Then again, you think about the quarterfinals, as Owen mentioned there, that you're playing against Italy, in Italy, and it's only Schillaci's goal from a spilled Pacchi Donadoni. I mean, that brilliant story. Jack says the Pope would have saved it. And it's those moments that we're not at major finals, and then suddenly we're not only at major finals making up the numbers, we're competitive. We're the team that everyone doesn't really want to play, and we could have done something so special. So for a teenager growing up to have those moments, they were just unbelievable. They really were. And then obviously I get into the under 21 team. You're in and around the first team, your heroes. Quite often we would have played against them just as warm-ups in terms of them prepping for their main game. But to be around Jack Charlton and on the training ground, which he'd often come over to the under 21s, we'd do a bit of training with him, and he had such presence, but with such humility as well. It's difficult to explain it because we're all in awe of him, yet he was so giving. I actually was brought with the first team to travel in '95 to the Dublin game against Austria. You know, as an under-21 player, he just said, like, Breen travels with us now. He's one of us now. And imagine hearing that as a young kid initially, that they're your heroes. Now suddenly you're part of it. I was in such awe, but I'll never forget that.
They'd obviously marked you out as somebody who they really liked, and you know,
yeah,
the fact that he's a centre half as well, you know, stretching back all the way to his playing career, but he's a centre half. The centre halves that have played for Ireland from the time that he gets there, it's, you know, it's obviously Big Mick, but it's Paul McGrath and it's Lawrence and
Kevin Moran.
Like, these were great players.
Yeah, they're unbelievable players. And as a young centre-half who's quite slim and not particularly strong, you're looking at these men as giants, aren't you, really? And especially when you used to stand next to Jack as well, such a big, imposing man. And when you get the nod that, like, he's saying to you, like, yeah, like, no, you've done your 21s, you come up with us now, that's incredible. But I think at the time, as a centre-half, yeah, you're thinking, well, listen, that's a great vote of confidence. But don't forget that the likes of Gary Kelly, McAteer, Babb, Mark Kennedy at that time were being pulled up as well as younger players and then put into that iconic, that pioneer team that was aging. Of course it was, and he was looking for the next batch to come along. But in terms of those memories, they'll never be able to take them away from them. They're my greatest sporting memories, without a doubt. 88 and 90. Of course, I've played in World Cups. I've had the honour and I've had the fortune to be able to do that. But as a kid growing up, my God, those memories just live in the memory. And it's not only us being there as a football team and showing the quality that Irish players have in terms of on the world stage, major finals, look what it gave birth to in terms of our supporters, and how every major finals, whoever are the organisers, whoever the host countries, are so desperate to have our supporters there because of the impact that they make. And we first saw that, of course, against England in Stuttgart in '88.
So there's no family in Ireland who hasn't been touched in some way by emigration at some point over the last 100 years.
Yeah.
And the other thing that Jack did, obviously the rules changed, and this allowed for the children of emigrants to come and join our team again. And I always, I think one of the things that helped to bind those players to Ireland was the perception from a lot of the English media. It was like, oh, look at Jack, look, his team, one of his lads had a pint of Guinness there, plastic paddies, all that kind of stuff. The fact that there were so many commentators in the Daily Mail and the Sun who were constantly chirping on about this Irish team not being very Irish actually really pissed us off, to the point where we're like, yes, they are Irish. And actually, one of the reasons why people have had to emigrate, not getting into the 800 years here, don't worry.
Yeah, no.
But the thing is that, like, that's a very layered, nuanced thing where it could have gone the other way. It could have been something that actually, this was a team of mercenaries and some of them didn't really understand exactly what it was like. So I'm really interested in your experience as somebody who did grow up in that tradition, who did go to an Irish school, who did know a bunch of Irish people, what it was like to be able to bounce into school that day.
Oh, yeah, well, it was everything. But I know when everyone hears my accent, and obviously I was brought up in Camden Town, but I don't have much in common with those guys who had declared for Ireland, because for me, I don't have any English relatives. I consider myself Irish. I don't see the comparison to other players, but I can understand at times where, because I've been quite vocal on that. I don't want players just coming to get an international cap. I don't want it. But I do, at the same time, do know that when their lads do come in, they really do immerse themselves in it. But I still want players to have the feeling that I had, that growing up, that it meant everything to play for Ireland, that anyone of my age, my generation, who were you supporting in '88, that time when Ray Anton scored the header? You know, that gives a good insight into whether or not you are English or Irish, regardless of whether you can qualify to play. But in terms of going, so bearing in mind, growing up in Camden Town, a huge Irish community there anyway. I go to St Aloysius in North London, where so many Irish, run by Christian brothers and stuff like that. To bowl into school, to literally bounce in there, couldn't get into school quick enough after that result. I was so proud, because in the build-up to it, everyone's thinking, Ireland got no chance. But the reality is, and we've said this so many times, Ireland had unbelievable players. You think about Paul McGrath, Ronnie Whelan, these type of guys. These are top players. These are players who were better, in my opinion, than a lot of the England players. So we probably look back on it because it's our first major championship that it's a big shock. But when you look at the quality of the players, and I think even now when you talk about those pioneer players now, they were very confident. They were playing against those England players week in, week out. We had so many players at Manchester United, Liverpool, Arsenal, so they could cope. So maybe it wasn't a massive shock to them, but it had a huge impact in terms of Ireland and, of course, in the Irish community in and around London.
And in terms of their self-confidence about expressing the fact that they were Irish, I don't know how easy or otherwise it was in the early 90s when the Troubles were raging and the IRA bombing campaign was happening. Not necessarily something that everybody was wearing Ireland jerseys all the time, or kind of, you know,
No, of course. And obviously, Joe, you asked the scenario, like, in terms of history. My mum doesn't want to leave Ireland. My dad don't want to leave Ireland, but they have to because of work. Like so many people before the generation, so many people had to do that. But that connection was so strong. It was always referenced as home. Home was never London. In the school holidays, whatever, we're going home. You know, it was strange. And you're quite right, because it wouldn't have been particularly welcome, of course, when my mum and dad come over to England in the 70s. You know, we know about those famous signs where Irish are not welcome, blacks, dogs, that type of nonsense. But having said that, it was incredible when that game was won in '88, because you are going to school, you know, a strict uniform at my school, but Irish jerseys were just being worn and no one was saying nothing. I like to remember those days as opposed to the toughness that my mum and dad might have faced coming over initially.
Did you watch that game with your folks? Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember so vividly about it, because I actually played for my club team, my local team, Camden Boys or Camden Saints, on that morning, then home to watch the game. My uncle was actually over from Ireland at the time as well, so the house And I just remember it being so hot. Obviously, we see the pictures of the game as well, and how hot it was and those summers. But it was just such excitement, because I said to you, like, in terms of 1982, Spain 82, at that age now, what am I? I'm 9. I'm really buying into now these major finals, and Ireland are not there. Now, suddenly they are there. The excitement was huge. It really was.
So you're 15, you're getting to the point where you might be thinking about football as a career. Are you good enough at that stage? Do you kind of think that you are going to make it? Like, are you beginning to dream at some point, I'm going to be part of this long, continuous story of Irish teams?
Well, that is obviously, that's the dream that you have as a kid, but the reality is you kind of think you're far away from it as such. You kind of hope it will. But then, and I've said it to you guys so many times, but then I look at Paul McGrath, and he's a giant of a man, and you think, well, how can you possibly be playing if someone like that's playing? He looks like a mountain back there. Mick McCarthy as well. Kevin Moran, such physicality about him. But you obviously, you make those small steps. You get into Ireland, and the 21s at 18 years of age, and then you're suddenly in and around it, and then the belief comes, well, maybe I can. But even when I actually did get into the senior squad, and the likes of Ray Houghton and Andy Towns and those guys, as they are still there, you're in such in awe of them. Obviously, Jack, when I was a 21 player, you're in and around the same hotel as them, because obviously his assistant Morissette's was our manager, so you're training on pitches either side of one another, and even though you're training, you're concentrating on the game. I felt it was so difficult not to like look over and be drifting off a little bit to watching them train. And I don't know, it just, I mean, I've said it to you guys so many times, it's a dream come true to play for Ireland. But Jack Charlton, he's just such an iconic figure. He really is. And you know, of course we'll be missed, but I like to remember people when they're alive as such, and celebrate their life, and 100%. What a life he had. Iconic man. You think about Leeds, what he done. Leeds wins a World Cup. It's a very sad time, of course it is, but one of like immense pride to have been associated or to had any little impact on you. He had a little impact on my life. I'm so proud of it.
To be honest, and I know I'm labouring the point here, but I actually think that the impact that he had on your family, that's replicated in so many different ways, because it allows us all to have a conversation about the Irish emigrant population in England, and how actually they're part of us, and how we need to talk about that, and how we need to try and prevent people from having to leave in the future. If people want to go, absolutely, go off and see the world, 100%.
Yeah, but don't be forced to go. Don't leave your home to go into an environment that's hostile, that's not welcoming. But you have to do it for your family. But it is amazing, because I was over in Cork before the lockdown, staying at my uncle and aunt's, and my uncle, I mentioned him quite a lot, Eamon travels the world to watch Ireland play. But I was actually staying in one of the bedrooms, and it was one of my cousins who were kids at the time when I was playing. Obviously, they're grown up now. But there was still a picture there of Jack Charlton and the kids. Yeah. There was no picture of like Roy Keane. There was no picture of Robbie Keane. Now, you think about when I was playing for Ireland, and afterwards, my young cousins would be able to come into the players' bar afterwards and meet all their heroes. But it's the picture of Jack Charlton that's there, and Father Ted, because he was in the bar as well. They're the two. There's no Roy Keane, there's no Robbie Keane, there's no Damien Duff. And it really made me laugh, it did. And it just shows you the impact that Jack Charlton has on everyone. On everyone, he does. He's such an iconic figure.
Think about the life that he's had, where he wins a World Cup playing for his own country, and we barely mention it. It's like, you know, it's been an impressive thing to win a World Cup for whoever you are. It's quite a remarkable enough achievement. We're like, yeah, good man, but actually all this other stuff that happened. And look, maybe all those conversations were going to happen anyway, and who knows what would have happened without him. But this is the world that we've been given, and I just think it's like, it's such a multi-layered story, as opposed to a man came and played football, and we, you know, played long ball and put the other team under opposition, and nobody knew what to do with it, and we got to a World Cup quarter-final, and that's all that's to the story. It's a beautifully woven tapestry of thousands and thousands, and actually millions of lives for the last 30 years that have kind of rallied behind football in a way too, that like football as a culture in Ireland didn't have mass public support in the way that it did afterwards. And I know there's a little bit of like, there's certainly a generation from the League of Ireland who think that the League of Ireland got left behind in that, and we probably need to have that conversation now as well, like to just broaden the church of Irish football back to where it was the single most important national team, and it still is, Gary. That's the thing. That's why, like, I think what that team from '88 all the way through to '94 or '95 had the power to do was to make us all go, this is cool, we should get behind this team.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about our national championship with the football, the hurling, and the supporters, the day out, they're amazing. You try to kind of say that. Obviously, as a kid, I'd be coming over, going to watch the great 80s Kerry team, and I'd be coming back to London saying to my mates who are not Irish, you need to somehow come over and watch that. And they just didn't know about it, did they, as such, in terms of how much passion it was supporting the counties or whatever. And then suddenly, in '88, our Irish supporters are on the main stage as such, and the whole world gets to see it again. And likewise, I said this at a time when we started playing our games at Croke Park while the stadium was being built, that I suddenly now I could say to everyone who I grew up with, my mates in England, like, look at our stadiums. And they're like, what stadium's that? It's Croke Park, where we play the Gaelic games and stuff like that, and being so proud of it. But for the world to see our supporters, be it in '88 and '90, and of course then in '94, when you hear that in that giant stadium against Italy that there's Irish supporters everywhere, it was amazing. And then to get into the team and then be around the likes of Mick Byrne, and who's telling stories about Jack, and as an Ireland supporter growing up, I was in my absolute element. I really was. You know, when people say it's about a dream come true, for me, it really was. I know it sounds romantic, sounds a bit like soppy as such, but it really was a dream come true to suddenly be, yeah, of course, playing and wearing the green shirt, but to be amongst it, to be in the inner circle, as it was, and then, of course, go out and then play in front of those travelling supporters who were, of course, in Dublin, but also all around the world. It was such a I look back with such pride.
Do you feel Ireland as a nation was taken more seriously abroad as a result of what these Jack Charlton teams achieved?
Footballing terms, or just
footballing and as a nation?
Yeah,
I guess
and culturally, yeah. I think so. I think, Owen, because so many, and as Jer said there, so many of our Irishmen and women had to leave their homes and have travelled the world. I know it's the Americas, Australia, England, whatever, but they seem to have had to kind of like emigrate all over the world. So suddenly when we're on the world stage, you can imagine, listen, of course, the whole of Ireland is gripped by what's happened in '88 and '90, and of course, the massive Irish community in England. But can you imagine in Americas? Of course, we saw that in Giant Stadium, didn't we, in terms of the fact that the Italians were completely outnumbered when they have such a massive population in and around America. But I do believe, yeah, I think suddenly you're on the world stage. I think, don't we all, we learn about, it's a terrible thing to say, but I think even now we're learning about countries by when we're seeing their football team, aren't we? And we go, oh, where about exactly is that? It's just human nature.
Yeah, it is hard to disassociate the two things, and that's kind of why I asked the question. The other question I have, Gary, is like the question of legacy from this Jack Charlton team. And I guess you'd be perfectly placed to have played in the only World Cup team that wasn't managed by Jack Charlton. Was there a legacy? Was there a sort of impact from what had happened in the 90s on your achievements in the early 2000s in terms of qualifying, in terms of that belief in Irish football?
Yeah, of course there's a legacy, but what more than anything is there's a huge responsibility, because you've got to perform. You know, it's as simple as that. It's all well and good getting there. And that's why when I think about the guys who got to the Euros in 2012 and it just like didn't lay a glove on anyone, lost all 3 games, that's what I felt so sorry for those guys, because they grew up dreaming of playing for Ireland. And the dream is always that you have an iconic moment. There's a big game. There's something to look back on. They never had any of that. But of course, there's huge responsibilities. And even when people talk about Jack Charlton's style of play, there was huge responsibilities within that. It's all well and good saying it's route one or such like that, but it was so organised, so well drilled that you had to execute it well. We felt that even with the under-21s. We felt at times when we trained with them that if you didn't play the ball in the right area, I remember vividly him training with us, the under-21s, doing a shooting session at the end. If you hit the ball over the bar, he was absolutely seething, saying, what chance have you got? You've got to hit the target. Even if the goalkeeper saves it, it keeps it alive. We've got another chance again. And that famous saying of keep him under pressure, his whole game plan was built around that. And it must have been so stifling to play against those players who were technically very good players. We know that. But imagine really with that high energy, that relentlessness of their play. No wonder we were able to impact at major finals because it was so difficult to play against.
Was there any pressure in coming after that team?
Massive pressure. Of course there is. But obviously, and Jack said it, I mean, I was reading the quotes over the weekend, and he actually said to that team that lost against Holland in the playoffs, I remember there's a quote attributed to him saying, listen, we're struggling. You can't run as quick as you or as hard as you used to before. So he knew he had an aging team. And I think he probably intimated that he would like to bring the next generation through. But I don't think that was ever going to happen in terms of his age as such. But there is pressure. Of course there is, in terms of replacing those players, because how can you replace? I mean, as I said to you, I struggled in training. In games, it was fine because the whistle would go, but even in training, you're turning around and shouting to Paul McGrath, give me the ball, or Ray, give me the... I found it so difficult at first. I really did. I struggled in training. Games were easy because you get used to it. The whistle blows and you're in your own environment again. But I always wondered about, as a senior player in the Ireland squad, when the younger ones were coming through, maybe on the back of 2002 World Cup, a lot of those players towards the end of my career would have been young boys watching those games. But I don't ever remember them ever being in total awe of us. Maybe they were with Robbie in terms of his goal, but I don't think they ever were in a way that I certainly was. The lads of my age were when we suddenly were playing with the pioneers of 88, 90 and 94. I know a lot of them had retired, but there was still a lot of them around. I don't know, it's just weird because you just put them on a pedestal. I think if we'd have won that penalty shootout against Spain, possibly could have got to the semi-final, could have probably got to the World Cup final with a bit of luck. But the reality is that those pioneers would still be the ones that we put on a pedestal more than anyone else.
You had a pretty good team too. You did all right, Gary. Listen, it's been great. And it's just been a wide-ranging conversation. I think they need to pay proper testimony to Jack Charlton. But thanks.